From the Post Building in downtown North St. Louis, this is Inside City. Today, I'm honored to interview Mayor Tishaura O. Jones. Mayor Jones is the first African-American woman to serve as mayor of St. Louis. I spoke to her about her path to the mayor's office, the work she's done, and the work that's still yet to be done. Mayor Jones, thank you so much for coming today. I know you're very busy and taking time out of your schedule.
You're welcome.
So it was interesting to me, your path to the mayor's office. And you've been a state representative, you've been through the treasurer's office, but one of the things you were talking about was the TWA reservation was actually very helpful in your current job. So that surprised me a little bit. How did that help you on your path?
So there is nothing more stressful than talking to someone on the other side of the phone who is stranded or trapped somewhere and trying to get somewhere, right? So it requires a special kind of ability, skills, customer service, talking to people, talking them down from being angry. I would say that while working in reservations at TWA, I learned a whole host of skills about just personal interactions.
And you never know who's going to be on the other end of the line. It could be someone who's young, old, whatever that is. And so that prepared you for that type of a conversation.
Exactly, to treat everybody the same, no matter who's on the other end of the line.
And to try to solve those problems.
Exactly.
In terms of your early role models and who those might be, Oprah Winfrey had talked about, I think it was the 1964 Academy Awards, and seeing Sidney Poitier on screen. And that was a kind of a revelation for her as a young girl, because that an African-American could be on screen. And that was really meaningful to her. And there weren't any African-American mayors when you were young, and certainly no women. You're the first one for St. Louis. Who were some of your role models growing up?
Growing up, some of my role models were Shirley Chisholm, watching her, Barbara Jackson in Congress. And then even more close to home, Pearlie Evans, who ran Bill Clay's campaigns for many, many years. My father was a protege of Bill Clay Sr. And so we spent a lot of time with the Clays and with especially with Pearlie. And other strong women around her. And so, her, Betty Thompson, other local Black female powerhouses, Paula Carter, was able to watch them lead as a young girl. And I was enamored by their strength.
So having your father in politics must both be positive and negative, or good, tough sometimes, I expect, both as a role model, but also your parents, family business, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it has a halo effect, but it also requires a lot of responsibility. The old saying, to whom much is given, much is required. And I felt like I had to grow up really quickly as a little girl, even though I was able to, play with my cousins, do the whole thing, playing outside till the streetlights came on. Also, I was required to, put on dresses and be quiet and, really have a lot of self-control as a little girl growing up, because I would be with my dad a lot and, try to sit there quietly while he did business, meeting with different constituency organizations, meeting with the Board of Aldermen. I was about maybe 9 years old when he was first elected. So coming downtown to the board and sitting in his chair at his desk.
Oh, that's
on
a neat
Fridays.
memory.
It was a great memory.
In a lot of ways, as far as a woman in that role, you had those other role models that showed that could be possible then, and felt that ability.
Yes, absolutely. And my father has raised 3 girls. I am the oldest, even though I'm my mother and father's only child. He remarried and had I have 2 other younger siblings, but all girls. And he has always taught us that we can be whatever we want if we put our mind to it.
In your State of the City address, your first one, I believe, you talked about the big house and what you grew up in and the importance of community. And you've touched on that a little bit. Talk a little more about what that meant to you as part of the neighborhood and part of a larger community?
Yes. So my grandparents purchased their first and only home in the 1950s in what is now known as the West Side on Julian Avenue. And my mother and all of her siblings lived there. And it was a sense of community. We all looked out for each other,
That
even the neighbors.
so that extended family. I didn't realize
Yes.
so your siblings were in that house too.
No, my mother's
I
siblings.
see.
Yeah, my mother was the baby of 13.
Oh my goodness.
So her siblings
I see.
were there. And when they did move out, they still were in the neighborhood. So either walkable or a short bike ride away. And we had a sense of community. We all looked out for each other, even, the neighbors, we all knew each other. We all grew up together. And again, we just all looked out for each other, no matter what it was.
And given what has happened to a lot of those neighborhoods and that loss of community, that's one of the hardest things now to get back because you don't have, in a lot of ways, the institutions, but you also just don't have the people there anymore that look out for one another.
Hmm.
And the question is, how do we do that today? How do we get that very genuine and authentic experience, the phrase of "it takes a village"? It seems like that's maybe some of the biggest loss that we've seen from the North Side.
That is the biggest loss. Drive past most North Side neighborhoods, and you'll find that a lot of the homes aren't there anymore. The
Mhm.
big house that I grew up in is not there anymore. It was struck by lightning in the early 2000s. And I think that that's the work that we're doing with the Economic Justice Action Plan. We
Mhm.
are rebuilding neighborhoods block by block. We are taking a block by block approach as we look at our building stabilization funds, our demolition funds, and seeing, what we can stabilize, what we can bring back, and also what we can build. We have the Home STL program that provides a $50,000, up to $50,000 in home assistance for new home buyers. So how are we putting all of these pieces together to rebuild community?
I see. And you had talked about economic justice, and again, in another one of your speeches, you talked about Martin Luther King, who spoke here in St. Louis, and you used a phrase, civil rights to silver rights and economic justice. And so that meant, I think in that you had talked about how not enough progress had been made on economic justice.
Mhm.
But it seems like you're grounded in the treasurer's office and the dollars. And so that economic justice, what does that mean for you and for those communities?
For me, it means having the ability to empower, develop, and transform communities. We may never get back to what things used to be in the 1950s, right? Where St. Louis was at its population at the highest of
Right.
800,000. However, what can we do to stem the tide, to change this, to change the course that we're currently on? What can we do? How can we rebuild neighborhoods that haven't seen investment in decades? How can we reestablish homes where there hasn't been a mortgage established in 10 or 15 years in some
Yeah,
neighborhoods?
the bank would consider those bad risks and not willing to loan against them.
Exactly. So we have to heavily subsidize those areas in order to bring them back. And those subsidies are no different than the subsidies that big developers ask for in other well-developed parts of the city. We can't pick winners and losers. We have to pay attention. We can pay attention to downtown and the neighborhoods that surround downtown at the same time.
Are there particular areas of the city that then you're focused on, if whether it's the Ville neighborhood or other things that I think you start with the wins or the smaller things that are
Right.
working, whether that's Old North, Hyde Park, or those types of things. What areas are you focused on?
Right. So there are a few things actually going on. So we have Project Connect, which is the 5 neighborhoods that surround NGA, or the
Mhm.
National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. They've been a great partner because they realize that they just don't want to build a big federal facility
Right.
in the middle of North St. Louis. They want to make sure that the neighbors that surround that facility, the people who planted roots there, can benefit from the neighborhood when it comes back, that generational wealth that can be built. So we are actively working with those communities, making sure that they let us know what their needs are as far as development. And then we have neighborhood managers that try to make that happen.
And that's 5 different neighborhoods that are coming together, Project Connect.
Yeah, that's Project Connect. We're also focused on the MLK corridor from downtown all the way to the city limits, where Wellston is. So how do we connect the developments that are up and down MLK, starting with Friendly Temple, which is my church, to the west. Then you get to the Urban League, and then there's the Wold Community Center, and then you have a whole host of businesses in between, and then you get to the Monarch or the old Killark Electrical site, and then you get to downtown and NGA. So we are trying to link all of that together and change that horrible narrative of what happens when you end up on MLK Boulevard.
Well, I think it is changing the narrative that is the key. And so there's an advanced manufacturing that's going in at Rankin, which is a big thing. And that's $25 million that we got from the federal government, one of, 15 that was done. But there's a workforce redevelopment manufacturing. And is that on MLK as well? Or workforce training or something like that?
Yeah, the workforce training, which we renamed the Monarch.
Okay.
That is on MLK and Vandeventer. And we renamed it the Monarch because the monarch butterfly symbolizes transformation and rebirth.
And talk more about what the Monarch is doing and how the city's played a role in that.
Yes. So through our partners at SLDC, or the St. Louis Development Corporation, we are redeveloping the old Killark Electrical plant into a 150,000 square foot world-class workforce development agency, as well as we're going to co-locate several city agencies there: LRA, our Economic Empowerment Center, our Office of Violence Prevention, as well as our Workforce Development Arm, or SLATE, or St. Louis Agency on Training and Employment.
Yeah.
So all of those services will be co-located there, as well as companies. We are recruiting companies to use the site for advanced manufacturing. I can't talk about which companies we're trying to recruit because that would spoil the surprise.
Yeah, right.
But there are companies that are interested in moving to that facility to produce their products. So it could be that someone walks into the Monarch, into our workforce development agency, and says, I need a job, and we can pair them up with one of our companies on site. And it's also on 150,000 square feet of land. And so we're going to develop the land around it as well.
And that's a good example of if somebody comes in to go to that place, maybe they hit a coffee shop that isn't there, or the businesses around that should also then develop.
Absolutely. It's going to be a catalytic investment for North St. Louis and for that neighborhood.
So another stop along the way to the mayor's office was Sugar's Place at Washington and Euclid, and which you developed advocacy for women entrepreneurs. And that was something that didn't work.
Right.
But it seems that you can learn a lot from failure as well as success.
Absolutely.
If you can talk then about that and what went there and things that you learned from that.
Yeah, so I had the harebrained idea that I was going to be an entrepreneur in my early 20s. And my father and I and his best friend started a restaurant called Sugar's Place. And it was like a supper club. We had live music and, a really great bar. And it was great for the first maybe 9 months or so. And then, as people get tired of one particular concept, we just failed to reinvent ourselves.
About what year would that have? Was it anything like 01 or 08?
No,
was there
try
any
95, 96.
Okay.
And it was a great experience running my own business because I was responsible for payroll. I was responsible for operations. I even did a little bit of cooking and bartending. So I did just about and waitressing. I did just about everything in the business.
Small business owner. You do everything.
Yes.
Well, and that talks to how difficult it is to start a business, and there's a high mortality rate for new businesses,
there
like 80,
is
90%. But the idea of failing forward and all that, you took a lot from that, even though it ultimately didn't end up the way you wanted.
Yeah, I found out that wasn't for me, and that's okay. But learned a lot of lessons from that as well, especially on customer service, and again, dealing with people, and dealing with people when they're at their best and at their worst.
So the city does not always align with the state on specific issues, and you've been pretty
Mhm.
vocal about a few specific items from gun control, which in terms of the violence, as well as abortion rights, then state control of taking over the police, and all these things are
Mhm.
out there. What kind of line do you have to walk? Because St. Louis is within the state of Missouri. There are times when we look to the state to help and to work on things. And how do you draw that balancing act of maybe having a personal disagreement on some of these larger things and trying to coax, the administration into going a different direction?
So I have been very fortunate in that our current governor and I served together in the legislature. And so there was already a level of mutual respect and sort of an unspoken rule that we would not attack each other publicly. So that you don't see the governor and I in public spats. We
Hmm.
will have this difficult conversations in private behind
Hmm.
closed doors, but we also know what we agree on and what we don't agree on. And so
Hmm.
we tend to work on the things that we agree on: workforce development, expanding options to pre K, infrastructure. Those are things that anybody can get
Sure,
behind. And so those are the things that we work on. And we just kind of compartmentalize the things that we don't.
that makes sense.
Mhm.
So you've gotten really personal in some of your statements, really almost vulnerable. You talk about your son, who was, I think, 13 when you started, now 16, and I know he's
Mhm.
driving because you've told us he's driving.
Yes,
And
yes.
you've talked about some personal health issues.
Mhm.
And the idea as a leader, the idea of the leaders are strong, but you've actually approached this through a point of vulnerability, which
Yes.
is very interesting. And so, in terms of your ability to connect with people, talk about that a little bit.
Well, I want people to know that even though leaders are strong, we're also human. We are not superhuman. We have the same issues and challenges that anyone else has. I am a single mother raising a young Black man in this society and in this city. So dealing with the things that he experiences. Also, I have my own health issues, and I have been very upfront to talk about my issues with fibroids or my recent health scare with prediabetes.
Mhm.
I'm vulnerable because I want to let people know that they too can get over these things if they address them head on. And also, sometimes it's I had a friend um, that heard my story about my fibroids, and
Mhm.
it prompted her to make an appointment with her doctor, and she subsequently found out that she had something going on and got it addressed. So it's just a push to let people know that, hey, that we're the same. I am you and you are me.
So you get into the case of campaign promises of things that you have your stakeholders and constituents, and then you have the
Hmm.
legislative realities of making the sausage, and it's all
Hmm.
about compromise.
Right.
That's another line to walk as far as the ability to uh, have make those hard choices or go to the middle. And from where you started to where you are now, how do you feel about that?
There's a line from Hamilton that says, "Winning is easy, governing is harder."
Yeah, there you go. Right.
And I have learned that over and over and over again. A lot of times, the things that we think are good ideas may not always translate to being good in practice. And
Mhm.
I've learned that from the people that I manage. I've learned that from cabinet members because I don't make any decisions in a vacuum. I try to bring all of the subject matter experts to the table to say, hey, this is what I'm thinking of. This is, the direction I'm thinking of going. This is an idea that I want to propose. Will it work in your department? Sometimes they say yes. And I also give them the opportunity to tell me no. No, this isn't going to work because A, B, C, and D.
Or at least what the hazards are, I guess, because it seems that any direction you pick, there's winner. I won't say winners and losers. That doesn't sound right, but
Mm.
there's pros and cons to each. And so at
Right.
least if you understand, okay, these are the direction, that the implications, then you can make an informed decision.
Exactly. And I'm not afraid of institutional knowledge either. Either coming from my father or, talking to Darlene Green or some of the other experienced staff people in City Hall, like our budget director, Paul Payne. I'm not afraid to ask the question before I leap, because sometimes I have found out that they've already been down that road and have a good answer for me before taking that leap, and that sometimes that question has already been answered.
Well, and it's hard because it's very rare there's a specific right or wrong. It's just navigating through.
Right. It's somewhere, the answer is always somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So one of the things that has been on everybody's mind is the spending funds for ARPA and the RAMS money.
Hmm.
If I understand, about half of the ARPA money's already been allocated, and there is a process then for that. And so maybe if you could talk
Hmm.
about the ARPA money, and then I want to also then talk about the RAMS money, where you've talked about, I think, a municipal investment fund,
Right.
and the status of both of those.
So first, all of the ARPA money has actually been allocated or appropriated.
Okay.
And we just went through a exercise with our department directors to actually ask them, hey, we gave you this, we appropriated this to your department. We see it hasn't been spent. Can you spend it? And they've told us either yes or no. And we've reappropriated. We just passed our last reappropriation
I
bill
see.
at the board.
Because there is a deadline by a certain date. If it's not spent, it goes back to the federal government. then,
Right, 2026 is that deadline, but
Mhm.
2020, the end of this year, we have to have all of the sort of contracts
I see.
in place to spend the money.
I see.
So that is the deadline that we're up against right now. And so I am very confident that we will spend every dime.
Sure.
Because we put a lot of it towards infrastructure, and those infrastructure projects are starting now. We are going to repave 4 major thoroughfares throughout the city. That process takes time, from design and planning and bidding and all of the steps that go through from the time that the money's been allocated. People are now starting to put their public input in on the plans, because we're making our neighborhood rounds to ask them what they think and give us suggestions for other changes. We have $33 million in grants that are going to be going out the door this month through SLDC, through our corridor grant program, and other infrastructure projects that are on tap. And then on the RAMS money, we are trying to set up a municipal endowment fund, because putting my finance major hat on here, as a former investment banker, I am looking at this gift that we received from the NFL to try to see how we can live off the interest, or turn it into some sort of revenue producing fund where we can live off it for many, many years to come, and then use that money towards projects in future years.
And the RAMS money is complicated because the county's involved, and I guess the stadium is as well.
No, that
And
part's over.
that is over.
That is
okay.
over.
So it's been
Yes.
allocated.
Yes.
As the mayor, and working with the city of the aldermen who passed the laws, and you can say, I would like to do this, how much influence can you have on that? Or is it yours to decide? Or is it, well, we have to go through a process, and there are many forces at play here?
Yes, this is a collaborative process. This is where the sausage gets made, right? What do you do with the $250 million gift when you have basically 18 people who can decide where that money goes?
So it will be an aldermanic decision, or who gets to decide how that money goes?
I think it'll be a collaborative decision. The Board of Aldermen has done public surveys and have had committees of the whole where they've asked pertinent questions about infrastructure needs and other needs related to the money. I have also had discussions with financial institutions
Mhm.
on the idea of a municipal endowment fund. And as we talked about earlier, the answer may be somewhere in the middle, that maybe a chunk gets spent on infrastructure projects, and then another chunk may go to the municipal endowment fund.
I see. And there is no timeline on that as far as
No,
that has
there's
to be
no
spent.
timeline. There's no timeline, unlike ARPA. So we are focused on spending every dime of ARPA before the 2026 deadline, and then get to the RAMS money.
And there was that money is earning interest right now.
Yes, it is.
Very good.
Mhm.
So a couple of other things. As far as public safety goes, there's a sense that the city is broken in some ways, as far as just all the different things that are going on. The narrative of what it feels like, crime is actually down as compared to where it was a couple of years ago,
Hmm.
but people may not necessarily feel that way, and so you have the perception and the reality. And there have been some good things that have happened with Chief Tracy and
Hmm.
Gabe Gore. And so there's a couple ways to go about this. You've talked about data-driven solutions. So
Hmm.
maybe give an update on some specific things that are being done.
So, homicides are down 40% since when I took office in 2021, as well as just this year. We are actually tracking just about the same as we were last year. We are experiencing the law of diminishing returns. You know, when you have a big drop or a big increase,
Sure.
then it'll level out
Stabilize.
or
Yeah.
stabilize. But we are still doing all of the things in our crime plan to address the other reasons why police are called. Right, almost 50% of calls for service to 911 or our non-emergency line are things that don't need to be handled by police.
Mental health
Mental
professionals
health,
or,
substance
yeah.
abuse, some domestic violence issues. And so we are slowly but surely building up our alternative response methods. We have clinicians in our 911 center who can answer questions as people call in. We have our cops and clinicians program that pairs an officer with a social worker or behavioral health professional to answer calls in the field for mental or substance abuse problems. And we slowly or really quietly launched a non-police response unit that also handles issues with our unhoused. So
How
we
long has that been in place?
Since November of 2023.
And that's, you're showing some improvements there.
Showing some improvements there. We're finding that the alternate response methods that we have employed have saved the city millions of dollars and thousands of man hours from our EMS, fire, and police. So it lifts the burden of things that they have to respond to.
And these are city employees similar to the police that you hire in that are then paired in with police officers.
So our mental health piece, actually, we contract with Behavioral Health Response, which
I
is
see.
headquartered at the Delmar Divine.
Oh, that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Hmm.
One of the issues that you run into is just the sheer number of police officers or people that are available,
Hmm.
and those numbers are down. But you can also get to the root causes of the crime, and you've talked about that as well, to try
Right.
to address it at the source. And there's certain things that you've taken action on to help that,
Hmm.
and talk about those too, please.
So when we talk about root causes, I believe that the root cause of crime is poverty. And so we are addressing poverty head on. Right now, we have a guaranteed basic income pilot that is 540 families are receiving $500 a month for the next 18 months. And we're about 6 months in, so about the next year or so. And we're finding, and the data that from that program, we're finding that people are using the money to work less hours, i.e., not working two jobs, so maybe just working one, using that money for their bills, their rent, utilities, using the money to feed their families. And we're also finding that a couple of them are using it, or the couple of that I've interviewed personally, they use it for small business and starting and growing a small business. That's what we want to see. That's the kind of industriousness we want to see out of our citizens.
Another difficult issue are the homeless issues that we've got
Mhm.
without really any easy solutions.
Right.
You've talked before about a regional approach, that getting the county into the picture.
Mhm.
What is the ability of the city to realistically bring the county to the table? I mean, everybody talks about it, but are there any ways that you're able to realistically approach the county on specific programs so
Mhm.
that it isn't a case of somebody gets picked up in one of the municipal areas and then dropped off
Right.
downtown, which
Which
happens.
happens, right?
Everyone agrees it has to be a regional approach. Is there anything that the city can realistically do to help bring the county to the table?
So yes, I am chair of East West Gateway Council of Governments this year, and that rotates back and forth between Missouri and Illinois. And what I have decided to do with my chairmanship is push East West Gateway to do other things. So it started with when I was vice chair with the Crime Summit, and so we have agreed on a plan to reduce homicides and shootings in the entire region by 20% over the next 3 years using focused deterrence, cognitive behavioral theory, and credible messengers. Just last month in our meeting, I also brought up the issue of our unhoused. How can we, as a region, address our unhoused? And so we are working on a summit, just like we did with the crime summit. We're working on a summit on our unhoused. We're going to bring in subject matter experts who have experience in this around the country, and then we're going to develop a plan on how to reduce our homelessness as a region over the next several years.
Because if you look at the housing first model, it's more of a decentralized approach
Hmm.
as being success. And I think the solution that seems to be working in more cities than less is really just putting people in houses. And you've expanded the tiny house program.
Hmm.
And what are some of the things that you've done to improve the housing and the homeless issues?
So we have also changed the way that we fund housing services or unhoused services. We used to have a warming bus. And now we are pushing the people that we fund for homeless services to stay open 24/7, so someone doesn't get kicked out as soon as the sun rises. So how can we provide more wraparound services on a 24/7 basis rather than just kicking people out and putting them back on the
So
street?
again, getting to the root causes again and
Getting to
trying
the
to.
root causes, absolutely.
So you're headed for a second term,
Yes.
about a year from now, and I would just say, what are you most two-part question? What are you most proud of that you've accomplished, and
Mhm.
what challenges or what do you want to do coming up that would, if you were to be reelected in a second term?
I am most proud that St. Louis is safer, healthier, and stronger than we were 3 years ago when I first took office. We are safer because of the crime stats that I talked about. We are healthier because we have new programs in place to address people's root causes, mental health and substance abuse through our Behavioral Health Bureau at the Department of Health. Our Department of Health has grown by leaps and bounds under my administration and really addressing some of the root health causes. Even though we don't deliver direct care, we are out in the community working with partners, connecting people to services. And we're stronger because we are developing programs and really making the intentional investments to bring St. Louis back, to rebuild our population, to rebuild our tax base, to expand opportunity for people. So we're doing the hard work and laying the groundwork for what I think is a renaissance in the future.
There's People want simple solutions to complicated problems, and it just doesn't work that way.
Absolutely. It doesn't work that way. And we cannot depend on government alone for those solutions, which is why I have great relationships with the business community through the RBC and through Greater St. Louis Inc. Have great relationships with our educational community. We have to look at all of these things holistically, and there is no one silver bullet to solve any problem.
So in terms of a second term, what are you looking at? What are you hoping to achieve now that you've, sat in there and know what it's like?
I am hopeful that we will build on the progress that we've already started in my first term. There are so many more things that we can do or that we have to do. I'm looking forward to building the Green Line or the new Metrolink line that's going to go past NGA. I'm looking forward to cutting the ribbon at NGA. Looking forward to a new airport and starting that process as well. We are behind when it comes to the whole process of starting our airport because we spent the last 4 years, the previous administration, trying to sell the airport when we really should have been making the right investments into it to make it a world-class airport.
So we haven't really talked about the airport, and you just touched on that. And not everyone is aware of what Rhonda is doing up there and the progress that's being made. And
Hmm.
some of these things like the Metrolink and the NGA, I think the NGA has been almost 10 years in the making. The airport is going to be done sometime in the, I think,
2032.
yeah, quite a ways off.
Hmm.
And, but the airport is owned by the city, that's city property. To the degree, where are we in that process?
We have a grant right now pending at the Department of Transportation and the FAA to move the administrative services, or to build a new building to move the administrative services at the airport off-site, so we can expand the current terminal. We're going to go from a 2-terminal to a single terminal model, and we're getting the signatures right now from the airport, from the airlines, because their passenger facility fees are going to pay for that. This is in total a $3 billion project. So we have to put all of the pieces together in order to move that project forward.
And it isn't just the terminal itself, which I think is going to be around 60 gates, and the east one would become an FBO or relieved of that, but it's also the parking, the roads, all that,
Yes.
which really goes back to the 70s, the original, a lot of those things. But I think
Yeah.
the original terminal is going to remain really almost as a
Right.
lobby, and then
The original arches, right?
Yeah.
That iconic design actually, yes, is going to remain. But we're going to go to a single terminal, right? 62 gates. People don't think that that's a lot, but that's more than our current capacity. And Southwest is actually has 60% of our market share currently at the airport. So they're hopefully on board.
it's great.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else that we haven't covered that you'd like to bring up today?
Now that I can't think of, I think we've covered just about everything.
A little bit of everything, not too much of a deep dive on any
Yeah.
of it, but I
Yeah.
really appreciate you coming by today and giving us a few minutes.
Well, thank you for having me.